On a bitter winter morning, deep in a damp city alley, Sarah, a veterinary technician on her way to work, suddenly stopped when she heard a faint, painful moan coming from the darkness behind a dumpster. Hidden among the cold and the trash was a tiny stray cat, its body painfully thin, one eye clouded and nearly blind. Its breathing so fragile it seemed it could fade at any moment. Sarah had no idea that in that single instant, a decision born of compassion would set in motion a journey filled with tears, trials, and hope. But what makes this story truly special is not merely an ordinary rescue. That cat was more than an abandoned life. It carried a past scorched by loss, fear, and untold trauma. Can a heart once shattered by fire and solitude learn to trust humans again? And what would Sarah have to sacrifice to keep that fragile life in this world? Before we begin, take a moment to hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any new stories. A single, chilling cry pierced the silence of the alleyway. Midnight, the scrawny, matted street cat felt a tremors deep within his bones, a constant, violent shudder that had nothing to do with the biting wind. It was the pain, a dull throb that had sharpened into a hot, searing agony in the past hours. One of his eyes, usually the sharp emerald green, was now a milky, opaque white, a silent testament to a recent, brutal encounter he barely remembered. A deep gash, a canyon in his black fur, marred his flank, weeping a sticky warmth that mingled with the cold, wet grime of the alley. Every breath was a shallow, ragged rasp, a struggle against the crushing weight of exhaustion and the insistent ache of his broken body. The hunger, a gnawing, familiar companion, was a distant hum now, overshadowed by the overwhelming need for warmth, for an end to the ceaseless suffering. He lay curled in a tight ball behind an overflowing dumpster, the stench of decay, a familiar comfort, the only shelter from the relentless elements. His emaciated body, once agile and swift, barely twitched. He was a shadow amongst shadows, clinging to life by the thinnest thread. Then, a new scent. Not the usual human smells of garbage and hurried footsteps, but something softer, slower, less predatory. A giant, a new shadow was approaching. Midnight tried to flatten himself further, to disappear into the concrete and refuse. His muscles screamed in protest, a fresh wave of agony coursing through him. He was tired of running, tired of fighting, too weak to do either. He just wanted the pain to stop. He could feel the vibrations of approaching footsteps, heavy yet hesitant, unlike the usual aggressive stomps of the alley's inhabitants. Sarah, a compassionate but struggling veterinary technician, was on her way to work, the early morning chill biting at her exposed skin. Her thoughts were a jumbled mess of clinic schedules, a recent emotionally draining case of a neglected bulldog that hadn't made it, and the ever-present worry about her own finances. She rounded the corner, her gaze scanning the familiar, bleak landscape of the alley, and then she saw him. A small, dark lump, barely distinguishable from the shadows. Her heart, already heavy, clenched. He was so still, too still. As she cautiously approached, her footsteps soft despite the heavy boots, Midnight's ears twitched, barely perceptible. The giant was closer now, a warm scent emanating from it, not threatening, not like the others. He tried to push himself up, to bolt, but his limbs refused to obey, heavy and unresponsive. His vision, already blurry from pain, began to darken at the edges. The world tilted. A low, guttural growl, more a desperate plea than a warning, escaped his throat, a sound so weak it was almost swallowed by the alley's silence. He felt the tremors intensify, the world around him blurring into a kaleidoscope of gray and black. The giant was very close now, a soft voice murmuring, a sound Midnight dimly registered as gentle chadon, not angry. He felt a strange, detached sensation, as if his body was no longer his own. A sudden sharp pain flared in his flank as he tried to shift, and then a blissful emptiness. His body gave out. The last thing he registered before the encroaching darkness was a soft murmur of the giant's voice, a flicker of warmth, and the lingering scent of something clean, something not of the alley. He collapsed, his small broken form sinking into the cold, damp concrete, the last vestiges of his strength abandoning him. Sarah gasped, her heart leaping into her throat. He'd gone limp, completely. The sight of his broken, still form ignited a fierce, protective instinct within her. All thoughts of her own troubles evaporated, or were replaced by a singular, desperate need to save this tiny, struggling life. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that if she left him even for a moment, he wouldn't survive. This wasn't just another stray. This was a soul teetering on the edge, a stark reflection of the vulnerability that resonated deep within her own tired spirit. She swore she heard a silent plea, a whisper in the wind, but it was really the sharp, almost painful scent of rotting garbage mixed with something metallic, a sign of distress, a smell of blood. Midnight, the street cat, had learned to interpret the world through his nose, his good eye, in the constant thrum of hunger in his belly. The human was close, too close. He flattened himself against the cold, damp concrete, a shadow within a shadow, hoping the dim light wouldn't betray the gauntness of his frame, the way his ribs pressed against his matted fur like ridged mountains. His remaining eye, a vibrant green, darted nervously, tracking the encroaching giant. Fear, a familiar companion, constricted his chest, making the already difficult act of breathing a shallow, painful gasp. He'd survived this long by being invisible, by being swift, by being forgotten. Now this giant was breaking all his rules. Sarah's heart ached at his raw vulnerability, the way he seemed to shrink into himself, trying to become one with the filth. He hissed, a weak, reedy sound, more air than menace, but it was enough to make her pause, to respect the boundary he was attempting to draw. His one good eye, a startling emerald against his soot-black fur, was a swirling vortex of fear and desperation. He was too weak to truly resist. She knew it, but she wouldn't force him. Not yet. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered the carrier, placing it gently on the ground, a silent invitation. The metallic clang of the plastic against the pavement startled him, and he flinched, attempting to retreat further into the narrow gap, but his body betrayed him, his legs trembling, unable to hold his weight. The smell of fear from the giant was strong, but beneath it, something else, something softer, a scent of concern that he hadn't encountered in what felt like a lifetime. He didn't move for several long minutes, a lifetime in the frantic rhythm of his street life. The giant remained still, her scent steady, unthreatening. Hunger gnawed, a constant dull ache, but the fear was sharper, more immediate. Finally, curiosity, a dangerous but often rewarding instinct, nudged him forward. He sniffed the air, then the carrier. It smelled clean and soft, a luxury he hadn't known existed. His body felt heavy, each movement a monumental effort. He stumbled, a weak cry escaping him, and in that instant, the giant moved. Before he could react, a soft, warm hand was around him, lifting him. Panic flared, a burst of frantic energy, and he thrashed, a desperate yet futile struggle against the inevitable. Then, the warmth enveloped him, and he was inside the carrier, the soft blanket, a surprising comfort against his aching body. The latch clicked shut, a sound of finality, but not the terror he expected. The weight of his emaciation in her hands had been shocking, a stark reminder of the fragile line between life and death. The world became a blurry, swaying tunnel. The giant carried him, her moves fans and smooth, surprisingly gentle. The street sounds faded, replaced by the hum of an engine, a new, unsettling vibration. He was utterly disoriented, his instincts screaming for escape, but his body was a leaden weight, refusing to obey. A fleeting memory, not his own, but a faint echo, surfaced in the giant's mind. A small, fluffy terrier named Skipper, fading away, coughs racking his tiny frame, untouched by human hands that didn't know how to help. The memory hardened Sarah's resolve, a silent promise to the cat now nestled in her carrier. The scent of her concern deepened, becoming almost tangible, a strange new sensation. He felt a shift in the giant's embrace, a subtle tightening, a reassurance he didn't understand but somehow felt. He was being held, not roughly, not with the careless indifference he was accustomed to, but with a surprising tenderness. A tenderness. The giant's thumb stroked the top of his head, a feather-light touch, tentative yet comforting. He tensed, bracing for pain, for the familiar sting of rejection or malice. But there was nothing but the steady warmth, the rumbling of the engine, the strange new smells of disinfectant, and something else, something sweet, filled his limited world. He was tired, so terribly tired, the fear and exhausting weight. His body, usually a coiled spring of tension, began to relax, almost imperceptibly. A soft sound, a rumble from deep within his chest, surprised even him. A purr. It was a rusty, hesitant sound, a forgotten melody, a tiny flicker of trust in the midst of his pain and confusion. The giant, Sarah noticed it immediately, her breath catching. His initial hiss had turned into a soft purr of surrender, a fragile bridge built between two vastly different worlds. He was giving in, letting go, hoping, for the first time in what felt like forever, that this giant would not let him down. The vet's words were a gut punch. He might not make it. The large, bright room smelled of something clean and sharp, a scent that prickled the tender membranes of his nose. He was on a cold, hard surface, and his body, a collection of aches and tremors, barely registered the smooth, cool contact. Giants moved around him, their murmurs a low, unintelligible hum, punctuated by the occasional clinking of metal. One giant, taller and with a softer voice, was the one who had scooped him up from the terrifying cold outside, her touch, though firm, carrying a strange absence of malice. Now her face was close, her eyes, large and sad, watching him. A different giant, with spectacles perched on her nose, leaned in. This one's hands were methodical, probing, making him flinch. A sudden sharp sting in his hind leg made him yelp, a pathetic raspy sound that barely left his throat. Fear surged, a primal terror that knotted his starved stomach, reminding him of the other pains, the constant gnawing emptiness that had defined his existence. He tried to pull away, to escape the invasive touch, but his limbs were weak, useless things. He hated the giant, even the one with the sad eyes. They were all part of the same cruel world. The pain, though, slowly subsided, replaced by a strange warmth spreading through his veins, a feeling he hadn't known since the last time he'd felt the fleeting comfort of a sunbeam on a rare, safe patch of pavement. "Dr. Evans, please," Sarah's voice was a ragged whisper, pulling at the threads of her composure. She watched Dr. Evans, her kind but pragmatic boss, meticulously examine the small, broken creature on the table. Midnight, as Sarah had tentatively named him, was a heartbreaking tableau of neglect. His small frame was skeletal, his black fur dull and matted, a stark contrast to what she imagined it should be. The left eye, a horrifying, angry rupture, was almost certainly beyond saving. Dr. Evans's brow was furrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Sarah," Dr. Evans finally said, her voice is off but firm. "He's in a bad way. Severe malnutrition, clearly. That eye is ruptured beyond repair, and there's a dangerous infection. It's spreading rapidly. His white blood cell count, it's through the roof." She sighed, looking from Midnight to Sarah. "Even if we can stabilize the infection, the cost of treatment will be extensive. Enucleation, prolonged hospitalization, a feeding tube possibly. His chances are slim. Very slim." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Sarah felt a cold dread creep into her chest. Euthanasia. The word was a heavy stone. "No," she breathed, shaking her head. "No, we can't. He's fought so hard to survive this long. Look at him, Dr. Evans. He's trying. Please." The giant with the sad eyes spoke again, her voice wavering, but with a new determination that reached even his confused, pain-addled mind. He didn't understand the sounds, but the energy, the fierce protectiveness in her tone was unmistakable. He felt a different giant, the one with the spectacles, pause, her hand hovering over his giant back. He didn't flinch this time. A new sensation, not pain, but something soft, was gently pressed against his side. A warm fleece blanket. It was a strange comfort, a small barrier against the cold. "I'll cover all the costs," Sarah pleaded, her voice gaining strength. "Every single cent, and I'll take care of him personally. Around the clock. I know it'll be a long road, but he deserves a chance. He's just a baby. Dr. Evans's expression softened, but a hint of professional reservation remained. Sarah, I know you have a huge heart, but this is going to be incredibly demanding. Emotionally, physically, you'll be exhausted. And if he doesn't make it, her voice trailed off, leaving the unspoken fear hanging between them. Suddenly, a new taste filled his mouth, a watery, metallic tang that was strangely pleasant after days of nothing but the bitter dust of the streets. It was cool, clean water, trickling slowly from a small syringe held by Mesua, the giant with the sad eyes. He lapped it instinctively, the tiny sips a miracle, a quenching of a thirst so profound it had become a part of his very being. The touch was soft, deliberate, patient. For the first time, he didn't feel the threat. He felt care. Dr. Evans looked at Midnight again, her gaze lingering on his tiny, fragile form. You know, Sarah, she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. He might look old, beaten down by the streets, but judging by his teeth, he's barely 6 months old. He's just a kitten. The revelation hit Sarah like another blow, but this time it wasn't fear, but a surge of fierce, protective love. A kitten, barely 6 months. All that suffering, all that pain, crammed into such a tender, undeveloped life. It fueled her determination, hardening her resolve. He wasn't just another stray, he was a baby. Robbed of his kittenhood, clinging to life with desperate courage. He felt the gentle caress, a feather-light touch along his spine. It was the giant with the sad eyes, and her hand was warm, not probing, not hurting. He twitched, a tiny rumble starting deep in his chest, a sound he hadn't made he couldn't remember. It was an instinctual vibration, a response to a touch that felt, for the first time, truly safe. The sharp smells of the room were still there, but now, mixed with them, was the faint, reassuring scent of the giant, a scent that promised warmth and perhaps even food. Maybe, just maybe, this scary, overwhelming place held something good. Maybe these giants weren't so bad after all. What if this broken creature held a secret? Sarah watched Midnight, a mangy shadow of a cat, cower in the carrier, and the question gnawed at her. She knew the statistics, the grim realities of severely neglected animals, but something in his remaining eye even now sparked a defiant glint. He was a puzzle, and Sarah, for all her practical experience, felt an almost illogical pull to solve him. The journey home was a tense silence, broken only by the low rumble of her car and Midnight's occasional ragged breath. He hated the carrier, she could tell, pressing himself into the back, a tight knot of fear and pain. The world outside the metal box was a blur of threatening shapes and unfamiliar scents, each jolt of the vehicle sending a fresh wave of panic through his battered body. His ear throbbed, a dull, relentless ache. In the missing eye socket was a hollow, sensitive void that seemed to hum with ghost pain. He longed for the familiar chill of concrete, the sharp tang of alley refuse, anything but the suffocating confinement and the giant's soft, unyielding grip on the plastic handle. Her small apartment, usually a haven of quiet contemplation, was instantly transformed into a makeshift recovery ward. A soft blanket-lined box became his temporary sanctuary in the corner of her living room, away from the main traffic but still within her sight. The air filled with a sterile scent of antiseptic and the faint, sweet smell of cat food. Sarah, a whirlwind of quiet efficiency, set about administering medication. Midnight resisted, of course. His instincts screamed danger with every touch. The giant's hands, though gentle, were overwhelming. He batted at the syringe with a weak, clawless hissing, a sound more air than fury, as she managed to squirt the foul-tasting liquid into his mouth. The syringe was cold against his gums, the bitter medicine a violation. He recoiled, trembling, his body a tight spring of resistance. Each movement sent a jolt of pain through his bruised ribs, making him whimper softly. Warmth, that was a new sensation, a soft electric warmth that hummed beneath the blanket, soothing the perpetual chill that had settled deep in his bones. It wasn't the fleeting warmth of a sunbeam on cracked pavement, but a constant enveloping heat that slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to coax the stiffness from his abused muscles. She brought him food, a rich, moist pate, spoonful by spoonful, holding it patiently even as he turned his head away, the scent both alluring and threatening. He'd survived on scraps, on the bitter taste of hunger. This was too easy, too soft. It felt like a trap. Days bled into nights, a blur of medicine, forced feedings, and the constant soft murmur of the giant's voice. She cleaned the gash above his eye with a damp cloth, her touch feather-light, yet still jarring to his sensitive skin. One night, as Sarah carefully cleaned the remaining eye, dabbing gently at the crust that had gathered in the corner, she saw it. A peculiar, almost knowing intelligence deep within the cloudy depths. It wasn't just animal fear she saw, but a spark of something more, a flicker of memory perhaps. What had this cat seen? What had he endured before arriving on her doorstep? A broken mess of fur and bone. The question, once a mere whisper, now echoed louder in her mind. He wasn't just a cat, he was Midnight. And there was a story in those depths, a story waiting to be told. During a particularly difficult night, Midnight's breathing grew shallow. He was weaker than usual, his body barely responding. Sarah sat beside him, stroking his matted fur, her own fear a cold knot in her stomach. She spoke to him, soft reassurances, stories about the street he'd left behind, about the warmth and safety he was now finding. She spoke of hope, even as doubt gnawed at her. She felt the delicate rise and fall of his chest, barely perceptible. The endless fight, the constant pain, the fear of the giant's hands. It was all consuming. He was tired, so terribly tired. He wanted to give up, to simply close his eye and let the darkness take him. But then the giant's hand, warm and steady, settled near his head. It wasn't forceful, just present. A soft murmur of sound reached him, words he didn't understand, but the tone was different. It was soothing, comforting, and for the first time, not threatening. He stirred, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift. His body, usually rigid with tension, relaxed just a fraction. The giant continued to stroke him, a rhythmic, comforting motion. The pain was still there, a dull throb, but it was overshadowed for a moment by something new. Acceptance. A flicker of trust born not of understanding, but of sheer, exhausted vulnerability. And then he did it. A tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, but one that shattered Sarah's composure. Midnight, the feral, broken cat, lifted his head slightly, and with a soft sigh that seemed to release weeks of stored tension, rested it against Sarah's hand. It was a feather-light weight, a tentative surrender. A tiny, fragile bridge built across the chasm of fear and abuse. Sarah felt a catch in her throat, her eyes stinging. It was a gesture of trust, profound and overwhelming. And in that moment, she knew. She knew Midnight would fight, and she would fight alongside him. Every purr was a tiny victory against the odds. For Midnight, the cat, each soft rumble vibrating through his small chest was a rebellion against the cold, against the hunger, against the fear that had once been his constant companions. The giantess, Sarah, her scent a comforting blend of something warm and sweet, was a beacon in the shifting landscape of his new existence. He was still confused, the world still too big and loud sometimes, but the sting of the healing wounds on his flank was less, and the ache in his bones a distant memory. He'd learned the soft texture of her hand, the gentle pressure of her fingers stroking his head, the rumble of her voice a low, soothing sound he was beginning to associate with food and warmth. Then the warmth began to turn against him. It wasn't the good kind of warmth, the kind that came from Sarah's hand or the soft blankets. This was an insistent heat that burrowed deep inside, making his muscles tremble, turning his purr into a ragged gasp. The food, which had tasted so good, now sat in the bowl, an unappealing lump. His head throbbed, and even the comforting scent of Sarah felt distant, obscured by a wave of sickness. He heard her urgent, hushed words, felt her gentle touch turn frantic, and then the world was a dizzying blur of movement. The familiar confines of his safe space were gone, replaced by the jarring motion of the carrier, the rush of cold air against his fevered fur. He was scared again, the old fear of abandonment and pain clawing at his insides. The giants were back. More giants, their voices hushed, their movements quick. The giantess Sarah was there, her face a blur of worry, her hand a warm anchor against his shaking body. Then came the sting, a sharp jab in his leg, followed by a strange, cool sensation spreading through his veins. It wasn't pain like before, not the biting, tearing pain of the past, but a different kind of discomfort, a pressure that eventually gave way to a subtle easing of the overwhelming heat. The giant, with the gentle hands and the deep voice, was speaking softly, her words a soothing rhythm even if he couldn't understand them. He felt a cool dampness on his forehead, a light, rhythmic patting that was surprisingly comforting amidst the chaos. He tried to purr, to tell them he knew they were trying to help, but only a weak, raspy sound emerged. The exhaustion was overwhelming, pulling him under. Then a sudden, terrifying emptiness. The warmth, the coolness, the pressure, all of it vanished, replaced by a profound stillness. His own body felt distant, a shell he was barely inhabiting. He could hear distant murmurs, a rising panic in the giant's voices, then a sharp jolt. A sudden, jarring pressure on his chest, rhythmic and insistent, brought him back, gasping to the edge of awareness. Again and again, the pressure, a frantic rhythm against his small ribs. He heard Sarah's voice, a raw cry of fear that mirrored his own sudden, primal surge of instinct to live. He could feel her hand, not just touching him, but pressing against him, helping the other giantess push. It was a terrifying dance on the edge of the abyss, his tiny heart a flickering flame, refusing to be extinguished. The warmth returned, but this time it was a fierce, defiant warmth, though, a spark reignited by their combined will. The world slowly solidified around him again. The heat was still there, but it was gentle, nurturing, radiating from beneath him. He felt a soft whoosh of air near his nose, a steady rhythm that helped his tired lungs. Sarah was still there, her soft scent close, her hand a comforting weight on his back. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the presence, the unwavering sentinel watching over him. The fear had receded, replaced by a profound exhaustion, but also a new kind of peace. He was safe. He was cared for. The memory of the sudden emptiness, the frantic pressure, lingered, a stark reminder of how close he'd come to the ultimate cold. But now only warmth and the gentle rhythm of breathing. He began to purr, a soft, raspy rumble that was more affirmation than sound, a testament to the fragile, precious gift of life they had fought so hard to keep. Could a faded photograph unlock his forgotten world? The quiet hum of the room was a constant presence now, a gentle thrum against the backdrop of what used to be a world of sharp sounds and sudden threats. Midnight the cat, once a bundle of raw nerves and painful protests, was slowly, tentatively unfurling. The soft warmth of the blanket beneath him was no longer a trap, but a comfort. The food, a bland, nutrient-rich mush at first, then increasingly solid, always appeared in the same clean bowl, offered by the giant, who moved with such a strange, careful slowness. His body still ached in places, a dull throb where once there had been fire. But the relentless hunger that had gnawed at his insides for so long was a memory now, distant and fading. He'd learned the soft touch of her fingers, the rhythm of her breathing when she sat near, reading to him in a low murmur that calmed the frantic beating of his small heart. The world outside the window, a blur of green and sun, no longer seemed so terrifyingly out of reach. It was during one of these quiet, reassuring moments, as Sarah gently stroked Midnight's back, that her fingers brushed against something hard, almost imperceptible, buried deep within the thick, newly soft fur near his scruff. It wasn't a burr, nor a scab. With a feather-light touch, she worked at it, the cat offering only a low, rumbling purr of tolerance rather than his usual hiss of discomfort. Slowly, painstakingly, she managed to pull it free. It was a tag, tiny and almost entirely obscured by years of grime and matting. It was faded, slightly water-damaged, and utterly unremarkable save for the faint, almost erased etchings on its surface. Sarah squinted, holding it closer to the soft lamplight. Her heart gave a sudden, unexpected lurch. There, almost going, was a string of numbers that looked like an address, and below it, a single faded word: Whiskers. Whiskers, not Midnight. This wasn't just a stray she'd rescued from the brink. This was a cat with a past, a name, a home. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and full of unasked questions. It shifted something profound inside his heart, a new sense of purpose blooming in the space that had been reserved for healing. This wasn't just about saving a life, it was about reclaiming an identity. Could knowing his past, even a glimpse of it, help him heal faster? Could it unlock memories that might further soothe his troubled spirit? Midnight, the cat felt a strange shift in the giant's mood. Her touch became more urgent, her movements more focused. She murmured words he didn't understand, but the tone wasn't sharp or angry, just intense. He felt a faint phantom tug at his scruff where the hard object had been, a sensation that brought a fleeting, unidentifiable memory of pressure, of being held, not gently but firmly. It was a flicker in the darkness of his memory, a ghost of a feeling that vanished as quickly as it came. But then the giant was tapping it on a glowing screen, her fingers moving swiftly. He watched, half curious, half wary, from his safe nest. He'd learned to trust her, the soft-voiced giant who brought him a food and warmth, even when her actions were puzzling. Sarah threw herself into the task with a singular focus. The address was frustratingly vague, a street number and a partial street name in a nearby town. Calls to old phone directories yielded dead ends. Online searches for the name Whiskers, paired with the address, brought up nothing. It was like trying to catch smoke. Each unanswered call, each failed search, was a small sting of disappointment, yet it only fueled her resolve. She looked at Midnight, asleep in his crate, one paw tucked under his chin, his breathing shallow and even. He was more than a project. He was a living mystery, and she was determined to unravel it. For him, for Whiskers. The truth about Whiskers was far more heartbreaking than she imagined. Sarah felt a chill race through her even before she dialed the number on the tag, a premonition that something profound and sorrowful was about to unravel. Midnight, or Whiskers as the tag suggested, was curled tightly in his favorite sunbeam by the window, a small, scarred silhouette against the morning light. He had been making progress, tentative purrs rumbling in his chest when she stroked his back, a slow, almost imperceptible softening around his eyes. But the tag, a beacon of hope for his original family, now felt like a lead weight in her stomach. Sarah's fingers trembled as she pressed the call button. The line rang several times, each tone amplifying her apprehension, before a frail, wavering voice answered. "Hello?" it croaked, laced with a weariness that seeped through the phone. It was Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman living at the address on the tag. Her voice, fragile as antique lace, conveyed a sorrow that immediately resonated with Sarah. Sarah introduced herself, explaining about Midnight and the tag, the hope bubbling up in her chest, competing with a strange sense of dread. There was a long silence on the other end, punctuated by a shaky sigh. "Whiskers," Mrs. Henderson whispered, the name a ghost of a memory. "My Whiskers." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Mrs. Henderson, her voice now thick with emotion, recounted the story. Months ago, a devastating house fire had claimed not only her beloved home, but also her husband. In the chaos and terror, Whiskers, her cherished companion, had vanished. She had believed him perished in the blaze, consumed by the smoke and flames. His absence, a double grief piled upon her fresh widowhood. Sarah listened, her heart aching for the woman, for the cat, for the cruel hand of fate that had separated them. Midnight's trauma, she realized, was far deeper than she had ever imagined. A primal fear of fire, loss, and the sudden, devastating abandonment by the only family he had ever known. No wonder his initial fear had been so profound, so ingrained. The world had quite literally burned down around him. Midnight from his perch felt the shift in the air, the subtle change in the giantess's scent. A new note of sadness mixing with her usual comforting warmth. He didn't understand the sounds coming from the small black rectangle she held, but the tension in her shoulders, the slight furrow in her brow signaled something significant. His whiskers twitched, sampling the air. The sunbeam felt good, a familiar comfort, but a distant tremor, a ghost of a memory, made his tail twitch with unease. He remembered the heat, the roar, the overwhelming smell of smoke, the panic, the desperate scramble for an exit, the blinding terror of being left alone amidst the inferno. The memory was a searing brand, a raw spot beneath his newly mending skin. He had run, instinct driving him, away from the heat, away from the choking air, away from the place that had once been safe. Sarah struggled to keep her voice steady, offering comfort to Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Henderson, even as her own heart fractured for midnight. "He's safe now, Mrs. Henderson. He's being cared for." She shared details about his recovery, the careful steps they were taking for his physical and emotional rehabilitation. Then, a bittersweet revelation, a key emotional twist that confirmed his identity with heartbreaking certainty. Mrs. Henderson paused, collecting herself, and then described Whisker's unique purr, a deep, rumbling vibration that always seemed to start at his nose and ripple through his entire body. And then, the clincher, a distinctive white mark, small and perfectly shaped like a half moon, on his left front palm, just above the pads. Sarah's eyes immediately darted to Midnight, sleeping peacefully in his sunbeam. She tiptoed closer, her breath held. Gently, she lifted his front paw. There it was, the half moon, perfect, unmistakable. A wave of profound sadness and overwhelming affection washed over her. This wasn't just a stray she had rescued. This was Whiskers, a survivor, a testament to resilience, carrying the weight of a devastating past. His journey from the ashes, both literal and metaphorical, to the tentative safety of her home was a miracle, but the question remained, what now? Was Mrs. Henderson, frail and living in temporary housing, couldn't take him back. Her grief, her age, her circumstances, all spoke of an impossibility. Midnight, feeling the giantess's gentle touch, the slow, rhythmic stroke along his spine, felt a deep, rumbling vibration start in his chest. It was a familiar sensation, one that brought a strange comfort, a memory of soft hands and a gentle voice long ago. He stretched, kneading his paws into the plush blanket, a faint half-moon of white flashing on his left paw. The purr intensified, a low, contented sound. The food was always there, fresh water gleamed in the bowl, and the giantess, though large and initially frightening, had proven herself to be a source of unending warmth and soft touches. The sharp pangs of hunger, the constant vigilance against threats, the cold, wet fear of the nights, they were fading, replaced by a new, tentative trust. He was Whiskers, the survivor. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope, a whisper of peace, stirring in his battered heart. He was beginning to understand that some giants, like this one, could be good. They could mend things. And maybe, just maybe, they could make a broken world feel safe again. Forgiveness isn't just for others, it's for yourself. Sarah had whispered the words to her reflection that morning, the taste of stale coffee still lingering. Today was the day. Today she would attempt to mend more than just Midnight's physical wounds. She would try to stitch together the frayed edges of his past to bring him face to face with the life he'd lost. Mrs. Henderson, frail but resolute, was waiting. Midnight, oblivious to the emotional tightrope Sarah was preparing to walk, was curled on his favorite sun-drenched cushion, a picture of newfound contentment. His purr, once a hesitant rumble, now vibrated with a steady rhythm whenever Sarah was near. But beneath that newfound peace, Sarah knew the embers of fear still smoldered. The fire had taken more than Midnight's home. It had scorched something deep inside him. The carrier was a familiar scent now, not a source of terror. The ride in the metal box, however, was a jarring experience. The rumble beneath him, the shifting turns, the strange, fleeting smells of the outside world. It was all too much. Midnight pressed himself into the corner, his paws tucked neatly beneath him, a silent plea for stability. The giant, Sarah, spoke in soft, soothing tones, a low hum that was always comforting, even when his world was tilting. He could feel the warmth of her hand occasionally stroking the carrier, a reassurance that she was there. Then, a new place, a different smell, old and sweet, like dried flowers and forgotten dreams. Sarah lifted him out gently. His paws touched a soft rug, and he instinctively flattened himself, his tail twitching, a nervous question mark in the air. The room was bright, too bright, with soft light filtering through lace curtains. And then he saw her. Another giant, but this one was different, smaller than Sarah. Her scent was familiar, ancient, like a memory half forgotten. He remembered her. He did. The one who used to fill his bowl with salmon pate, the one whose lap was a warm haven on cold nights. Her voice, reedy and trembling, called his name. Midnight, oh my sweet boy. It was a sound that resonated deep in his bones, stirring a primal recognition. His instincts screamed danger, a holdover from the days when human hands could be cruel, but another part of him, the deepest, most vulnerable part, yearned for the comfort her voice promised. He took a tentative step, then another, his eyes fixed on her face, searching for a sign. The scent of ash, faint but present, still clung to him, a constant reminder of the inferno. He could feel it, the heat, the roar, the terrifying absence of his giant's familiar presence. It was the deepest wound, the one that no amount of salmon pate or gentle strokes could erase. He wanted to go to her, his old giant, but the fear was a physical barrier, an invisible wall that kept him rooted. Sarah knelt beside him, her hand warm and steady on his back. It's okay, Midnight. She misses you. He saw the wetness in her eyes, the trembling of her hand as she so slowly extended it. The scent of her fingers was unmistakable. Her familiar touch, once a comfort, now laced with an unfamiliar sadness. He hesitated, his nose twitching, assessing. Was this a trap? Would the fear return if he let his guard down? Sarah's presence, a solid anchor of trust, was what finally broke through his apprehension. He leaned forward, just a fraction, and ever so gently he brushed his nose against her outstretched fingers. A tiny, almost inaudible purr escaped him. A sob hitched in Mrs. Henderson's throat. Her hand trembled as she began to stroke his head, her touch feather light. It was the touch he remembered, soft and loving, dispelling the lingering scent of fire and the harshness of the streets. For a fleeting moment, he was home again, safe in her familiar embrace. The warmth of her hand, the gentle scratch behind his ears. It was pure bliss, a taste of a past he thought was lost forever. But then the phantom heat returned, a flash of memory, and his body tensed. The sound of a car horn outside, a sudden sharp blast made him flinch. He pulled away from Mrs. Henderson's hand, his ears flattening, and instinctively he retreated. Not to the safety of the carrier, not to the shadows, but to Sarah. He rubbed his head against her leg, his tail wrapping around her ankle, a silent declaration of his new loyalties. Sarah was his refuge now, his constant in a world that had once burned him. He needed her warmth, her quiet strength, her unwavering presence. The old giant was a memory, a poignant ghost, but Sarah was his present, his future. Sarah's heart ached, a sweet, bitter-sweet ache. Seeing Midnight retreat, a fresh wound opening on the fragile fabric of his trust, was difficult. But then she felt his soft fur pressing against her, his body seeking her comfort. It was a profound shift, a declaration of trust that transcended the past. She stroked him, burying her face in his soft fur, inhaling his clean, comforting scent. In that moment, an old pain, long suppressed, resurfaced in Sarah's own heart. The ghost of her own lost pet, a furry companion she'd loved fiercely, whispered to her from the depths of her memory. The dedication she felt for Midnight, the unwavering need to protect and heal him, was, she realized, a way to mend that old wound, to honor the love she'd once given and lost. Midnight was not a replacement, but a testament to the enduring power of love and the profound connection between humans and animals. He was her anchor, just as she was his. And together they were healing, one tentative stroke, one quiet purr, one shared moment of trust at a time. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a quiet sense of peace. Sometimes, the greatest gifts come in unexpected forms. For Sarah, Midnight's arrival wasn't just another rescue. It was a mirror reflecting her own journey, a jagged fragment of pain slowly being pieced back together with gentle hands and unwavering patience. The gaunt, matted form of the stray cat, so utterly broken and terrified, had stirred something deep within her, a primal urge to protect, to heal, to prove that trust could still bloom in barren soil. The memory of Midnight's initial struggle, a desperate, guttural yowl as the trap mechanism clicked shut, still resonated in her ears. He hadn't understood the soft words, the careful movements. All he'd known was the sudden enclosure, the crushing weight of panic, and the familiar taste of betrayal that had been his constant companion on the streets. His body had been a tight knot of muscle and bone, every fiber screaming flight, even as exhaustion dragged him down. The journey to the clinic was a blur of bumps and vibrations, the constant thrum of the engine, a new kind of threat. He'd cowered, pressing himself against the cold metal mesh of the carrier. Every loud sound, every fleeting shadow, a potential predator. Then came the giants. Their voices were low, rumbling sounds, but their hands were enormous, looming. He remembered the cold floor beneath his paws, the dizzying scent of antiseptic, and the sudden prick of pain in his flank. A sharp, fleeting sting, followed by a strange, heavy lethargy that made his legs feel like jelly. He fought it, every instinct screaming to run, to bite, to scratch. But the world was blurring and the giantess were speaking in soothing murmurs, their enormous fingers stroking his head with a tentative touch. It was unfamiliar, this gentleness. After so long of only rough kicks and hurled stones, a soft touch was almost more terrifying. The small dish of water, clean and clear, had been a revelation. For days he'd lapped at puddles, thick with street grime, desperate for a reprieve from the burning thirst. The clean water tasted like salvation, cool and pure against his parched tongue. He drank deeply, his guard still up, but the immediate primal need overriding his fear for a precious few moments. The food, a small pile of soft, odorous meat, was another marvel. He ate quickly, ravenously, the hollow ache in his stomach gradually receding. Each bite was a tiny victory over the gnawing hunger that had defined his existence. Sarah, witnessing Midnight's slow, arduous journey from a snarling, terrified creature to a cautiously accepting patient, found her own resolve strengthening. It wasn't enough to just patch up the broken and send them back out. There had to be more. Inspired by Midnight's resilience and her own journey, Sarah proposed a new initiative, a dedicated rehabilitation program focused on behavioral recovery alongside physical healing. A space where animals, particularly those with deep-seated trauma, could relearn trust at their own pace, free from the pressures of immediate adoption. She sat with Midnight, day after day, not pushing, just existing. Sometimes she'd write aloud, her voice a low, steady rumble. Sometimes she'd simply breathe, her presence a quiet anchor in his chaotic world. He was still wary, still flinching at sudden movements, but the primal fear was slowly giving way to a hesitant curiosity. The scent of her, a comforting mix of outdoors and something uniquely human, was becoming familiar. The giant wasn't always scary. Sometimes the giant brought soft blankets, warm food, and a quiet presence that didn't demand anything. One afternoon, during a particularly gentle grooming session, Sarah reached out, her hand moving slowly, deliberately towards Midnight's head. His muscles tensed, a low growl rumbling in his chest, a clear warning. He was ready to strike, to defend himself against the perceived threat, the long-ingrained instinct for survival flaring. But instead of retreating, Sarah simply held her hand steady, her eyes soft, unwavering. The world held its breath. Midnight's initial hiss was sharp, a desperate warning, but as her fingers lightly brushed his matted fur, a foreign sensation, not of pain or fear, but of something akin to comfort, rippled through in him. The growl softened, then died hard. His body, once rigid, began to relax almost imperceptibly, and then Against all odds, a tiny, ragged sound emerged from deep within his chest, a soft purr of surrender, a tiny flicker of trust in the midst of his pain. It was a small sound, barely audible, but to Sarah, it was a symphony. It meant everything. It meant that even the most broken could heal, that trust, though fragile, could be rebuilt. She continued to stroke him, her touch feather-light, savoring this delicate bridge they had just built. Midnight, still purring, leaned ever so slightly into her touch, a profound shift in his wary posture. He wasn't fully healed, not yet, but a new path forward had been forged. Against nature's fury, a bond forged in love faces its ultimate trial. The world had dissolved into a brutal white chaos. Wind, a living entity, shrieked through the skeletal trees, tearing at the snow-laden branches, each grown a prelude to disaster. Sarah's heart, a frantic bird, beat against her ribs, mirroring the fear gnawing at her insides. He had been gone too long. This wasn't just a storm, it was a predator. Shadow! Shadow! Her voice was ripped away by the gale, swallowed by the roar of the blizzard. Ethan, his face grim beneath a cap dusted with snow, pushed ahead, his powerful legs forging a path through drifts that came up to their knees. The cold was an invasive force, seeping through layers of clothing, numbing fingers and toes until they felt like lead. They had checked the barn, the shed, every usual haunt. Now they were moving towards the riverbank, a treacherous journey in clear weather, let alone this maelstrom. The small, dark shape registered first as just another shadow in the swirling snow. Then a faint, almost imperceptible twitch. There! Ethan's shout was a guttural roar against the wind. Sarah scrambled after him, her boots sinking deep, her breath catching in her ragged gasps. Shadow, the domestic short-hair cat, felt a cold that transcended mere discomfort, a pervasive ache that had settled deep into his bones, numbing his very core. His world had shrunk to this small, precarious ledge overlooking the churning, dark water. The snow was a ceaseless assault, a blinding, freezing curtain. He could hear sounds, muffled and distorted, but they held no meaning, only the vague, instinctual threat of a large, approaching presence. His body trembled uncontrollably, a futile effort to generate warmth. He was so tired, the wind bit at his ears, making them ache, and his paws, already numb, refused to respond to the urgency of shifting away from the edge. Then the giants were there. Two massive shapes looming over him, their voices a strange mix of deep rumbling and higher-pitched urgency. Their hands, enormous and clumsy, reached for him. Panic, a cold, sharp stab, jolted through his frozen body. He tried to flinch away and to retreat further into the snow, but his muscles were unresponsive, heavy and useless. A whimper, thin and weak, escaped his throat. He remembered other large hands, rougher, sharper, hands that had brought pain and fear. This felt similar, an invasion, a violation of his last sliver of solitude. A giant hand, surprisingly gentle despite its size, scooped him up. The world spun. He was pressed against something warm, something that smelled of human and a faint, comforting scent of hearth smoke. The movement was disorienting, jostling his frozen limbs, each slight shift sending a dull ache through him. He instinctively tried to struggle, a weak push of his numb paws, but his efforts were pathetic, barely registering against the firm grip. He was trapped, utterly at their mercy. His breath hitched, a tiny sound he didn't know he could make. The giants murmured, their voices low, an indistinguishable stream of sounds that somehow didn't feel as threatening as the wind's howl. The trek back was a brutal dance with the storm. Snow lashed at their faces, blinding them, but they pushed on, Ethan carefully cradling Shadow, Sarah close by, trying to shield them both. He felt the rhythmic thumping of the giant's heart against his own, a strong, steady beat that was slowly, almost imperceptibly, transferring warmth to his frozen body. The fear was still a tight knot in his stomach, but a new sensation was beginning to bloom. A strange, unfamiliar heat pushing back against the bone-deep cold. Then, a sickening crack, a deafening roar. The world plunged into an even deeper chaos of sound and motion. The giant carrying him stumbled, twisting. Shadow was suddenly free-falling, tumbling through the air, and a terrifying rush of cold, and then he was hitting the snow, the impact jarring through his already weakened body. He heard a loud crash, the shattering sound of wood. He was terrified, disoriented, scrambling blindly, but his limbs wouldn't obey. Before he could process the new terror, the large hands were back, scooping him up again, pressing him against the warm body once more. The giants were moving faster now, a frantic rush through the churning snow. He felt a different kind of warmth now, a radiating heat from the giant's body that was no longer just transferring, but actively enveloping him. The fear was still there, but it was starting to be edged out by something else, a deep, profound exhaustion, a yearning for this strange, comforting warmth to continue. Finally, a different kind of darkness, then light, a warm, glowing light. He was placed on something soft, a fluffy blanket. More giant hands, but these were gentler still, stroking his fur, unwrapping him. The sting of cold was replaced by a sweet, spreading warmth. He felt a sharp prick, a brief, startling pain, and then a wave of drowsy comfort washed over him. The sounds around him were softer, the giant's voices hushed and soothing. He was vaguely aware of a large, dark nose nudging his side, a soft sigh, and then the comforting weight of another, smaller, furry body curling against him. He was safe, he was warm. The ache in his bones began to recede, replaced by a delicious lassitude. More than just a scrawny, matted cat had been saved that day. A human heart, brittle and guarded, was finally beginning its own journey of rebirth. The world had gone hazy, then dark, and the jolt of being lifted was the last thing Shadow remembered clearly. Now a new pain, sharper than the gnawing ache in his belly, startled him. A prick, then a cool wet spread across his fur. His body felt heavy, his limbs unresponsive. The air was thick with strange smells, antiseptic, fear, and something else. Something soft and sweet that made his nose twitch despite the pain. He heard hushed voices, deep rumbling that vibrated through the cold surface beneath him. He wanted to flee, but his muscles wouldn't obey. A soft, continuous hum vibrated near him, a sound that surprisingly didn't feel threatening. He felt gentle prods, soft touches that were a stark contrast to the kicks and shoves he'd known. A giant hand, warm and firm, stroked his head. It was the woman's hand he dimly recognized, the one who had held him close when the world was a terrifying blur. A low purr, an involuntary twitch of his own throat, escaped him, a sound he hadn't made in what felt like a lifetime. The purr surprised even him. It felt like a small, broken thing, but it was there. Days blurred into a cycle of quiet suffering and tentative relief. The sharp sting of needles was followed by a delicious warmth that spread through his aching muscles. Bitter liquid was coaxed down his throat, then sweet, easily digestible food, a miracle after the constant gnaw of hunger. The giants moved around him, their voices soft, their movements deliberate. The woman, Sarah, was there often, her touch light, her scent calming. He learned to associate her presence with comfort, with the cessation of pain. The other giant, Ethan, was also kind, his voice a steady rumble, his fingers surprisingly gentle as they tended to his wounds. One day, the gnawing hunger returned, but this time it was a good hunger, a sign of returning strength. A bowl appeared, filled with soft, fragrant meat. He devoured it, a primal instinct taking over, the taste a revelation. Clean water, too, flowed freely, no longer a desperate search from puddles and gutters. Each sip was a small victory. His body, once a source of constant pain, slowly began to feel his own again. The fear, a constant companion for so long, began to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity. He watched the giants, observing their routines, their kindness. They were not threats, they were givers. His trust in Sarah was absolute now, forged in the crucible of his near-death experience. He remembered her face above him, her voice, her desperate plea for him to live. He remembered the feeling of her arms around him, protecting him from a world that had only ever offered cruelty. He began to seek her out, rubbing against her leg, a tentative request for affection. The purr, once broken, now came easily, a rumble of contentment deep in his chest. Sarah, in turn, found herself drawn to him, her own past anxieties and fears slowly ebbing away with each purr, each gentle head nuzzle. The clinic, once a place of routine and procedure, now felt like a second home, a sanctuary where lives were not just saved but transformed. She realized this was where she belonged, her true calling echoing in the steady beat of Shadow's recovering heart. One afternoon, fully recovered, his wounds healed, his eyes bright, Shadow was exploring the small recovery room. Sarah was sitting on the floor reading, her presence a comforting anchor. He looked at her, then at his own pause. He took a tentative step, then another, a burst of energy he hadn't felt in weeks. With a small, graceful leap, he jumped onto her lap, a movement so natural, so full of unburdening joy. He settled in, kneading her shriek, and then a deep, resonant purr vibrated through his entire body, a sound of profound contentment. He nudged her hand with his head, a silent request for a scratch behind his ears. As Sarah's fingers found the sweet spot, a wave of emotion washed over her, a feeling of completeness she hadn't experienced in years. Shadow's purr wasn't just healing his physical wounds. It was slowly, painstakingly mending the invisible scars on her own heart, a symphony of rebirth and renewal. The ripple effect of one act of kindness, Sarah had learned, was a force capable of changing countless lives, not just human ones. It was a truth whispered to her in the purr of a once broken cat, a promise she'd made to the terrified flicker in Shadow's eyes that first night. Shadow, now a sleek, vibrant tuxedo cat, a far cry from the emaciated Shadow he once was, stretched languidly on a sunbeam filtering through Sarah's living room window. His mended leg, though still bearing the faint scar, moved with newfound grace, a testament to resilience. His journey from a cowering, starved creature to this picture of serene confidence had ignited something fierce within Sarah. It wasn't enough to save just one. There were so many others, shadows in their own right, pointing the rain in dark corners. And so, Shadows, a haven was born, a foundation dedicated to reaching out to those forgotten, to mending the broken, and to rebuilding trust where it had been shattered. Ethan, always her steady anchor, became an indispensable partner. He handled the logistics, the outreach to local shelters, the networking with foster families. His calm demeanor was a balm, not just for Sarah, but for the animals who, though initially wary, seemed to sense the quiet strength in his presence. Shadow, of course, became the unofficial mascot. He was a living, breathing symbol of hope, his very existence a testament to the power of compassion. The first rescues were the hardest. Sarah remembered the little terrier mix, Rusty. He'd been found abandoned in a ditch, shivering and soaked. The confusion in his cloudy eyes had been heartbreaking. He'd flinched at every touch, every soft word, associating human hands with pain, human voices with shouts. When Sarah had first approached him in his temporary kennel, he'd pressed himself into the farthest corner, a low, guttural growl rumbling in his chest. His fur, matted with mud and burrs, bristled. Even the offer of a warm, meaty-smelling bowl of food had been met with suspicion. He darted forward, snatched a mouthful, and retreated, his head low, ears flattened. It took days, then weeks, of gentle persistence. A slow blink, a hesitant stretch of a paw, the tentative brush of a nose against her hand. He'd hated the initial bath, the sting of the antiseptic wash on his raw skin, the unfamiliar hands holding him still. But then came the soft towel, the warmth, the gentle massage, and a strange new sensation. Relief. He was just a Shadow with his silent, knowing presence, often seemed to be the catalyst for the other animals. He'd walk past their kennels, tail held high, a picture of calm, as if to say, see, it's safe here. He'd sometimes sit just outside a particularly fearful dog's enclosure, grooming himself with an almost theatrical nonchalance, demonstrating the peace he now felt. The transformation was slow, incremental, the hesitant twitch of an ear, the slow unfolding from a defensive curl, the first tentative sniff of a stranger's hand. Each tiny victory was celebrated. The first full night's sleep without whimpering, the first wag of a tail that wasn't followed by an immediate retreat, the taste of clean water, always available, always fresh, had been a revelation for so many. The dry ache in their throats replaced by a cool, refreshing flow. The sting of the deworming paste followed by the comforting warmth of a blanket, a gentle scratch behind the ears. These small acts of kindness, repeated consistently, began to chip away at the walls built from neglect and cruelty. The rehabilitation process was never just about physical healing. It was about teaching trust again, about replacing the memory of a raised hand with the feel of a gentle stroke, the echo of a harsh word with a soft, encouraging whisper. The fearful flinch at a sudden movement slowly faded into a curious glance. The cautious approach to food became eager anticipation. Sarah remembered the overwhelming relief when one particular stray, a skeletal German shepherd named Bear, who had arrived with deep lacerations on his flank, finally truly relaxed in her presence. He'd been so broken, so wary of human touch. The veterinarian's needle had brought a sharp, fleeting pain, but the subsequent warmth of the pain medication and the comforting weight of a clean blanket, coupled with the soft cooing from the giant human, had begun to rewrite his understanding of care. One evening, as she sat on the floor, softly speaking to him, he'd slowly, painstakingly rested his massive head in her lap. The weight, the warmth of his fur against her legs had been a profound moment, a silent acknowledgement of a bond forming. The story concluded with Sarah, Ethan, and Shadow at a Shadow's Haven adoption event. The air hummed with nervous excitement, a symphony of soft whines, happy yips, in the murmur of human voices. Shadow, perched on Ethan's shoulder, surveyed the bustling room with the quiet dignity of a seasoned patriarch. Across the room, a young couple knelt beside a kennel, cooing softly at a scruffy, medium-sized dog named Buster. Buster, a formerly abused bulldog mix, had arrived at the Haven withdrawn and terrified. His muscular body thin, his short brindle fur dull. Now his tail was a blur, his whole body wiggling with an almost unbearable joy as he licked the faces of his potential new family. Sarah watched, a lump forming in her throat as the adoption papers were signed. Buster, once a shadow himself, was finally stepping into the light. The couple let him out, his leash held loosely, his head up, trotting confidently beside them. The light born from their darkest hour, from Shadow's initial rescue, continued to shine brightly, radiating outward, inspiring a wave of compassion that rippled across the community. One wagging tail, one purring cat, one gentle touch at a time. If this video touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Just drop a simple comment. Maybe type 1 if you'd welcome more story like this, or 0 if you just want to say you were here, or sharing your thoughts about the video. We'll see you on the next video.